Okay, it is 7 o'clock. Let's begin the meeting if you can. Can we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Egan and Hoffenberg are absent. Mosier?
Here.
O'Connor's absent. Schwartz?
Here.
Wentink?
Here.
And Pace.
I am here.
We have a quorum.
We got that quorum.
Yeah.
Okay, so has everyone read the previous minutes? Hey, Glenn, is there anything to add?
I move we accept the minutes as submitted.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are accepted. Wonderful. Okay, we're here for case 280, text amendments related to Article 9 of the Range zoning code as proposed by the village staff. I guess I'd like a little presentation by the village staff. Here we go.
Of course. Thank you. So we have really two sections of Article 9 that we're looking to amend and presenting to you this evening for consideration. The first relates to solar panels on residential structures. And this really came from some recent cases to the Zoning Board of Appeals, where people were seeking relief from the current code requirement that prohibits solar panels from being placed on the front-facing elevation of the home or within 60 degrees of that front-facing elevation. And the ZBA evaluated those applications. They recommended approval of one and not of the other based on the standards for variations, but just by and large, the commission suggested that they would ask the village board to evaluate those standards because they felt like there were positive things about solar energy systems and that the applicants raised good considerations about why those things should be allowed. Those variation applications went to the village board. The village board approved both of them, and they directed staff to review and prepare text amendments to the zoning code to relax those restrictions on solar panels on single-family homes. So you'll see on page 3 of the staff memo, the language that we are proposing to strike is the language that says that no solar panel may be mounted facing or within a 60-degree angle of a front lot line, except if it's the most southerly lot line of the zoning lot, or if the panels are located on an accessory building in the back. So you could do them in your garage, in the back. You could do it if your front lot line was the southerly facing lot line, but you couldn't install them on your front elevation facing the front lot line, or even on an elevation on the side if it was within that 60 degrees of the front lot line, if you didn't face south. So what we're proposing instead is language that would just say that the solar panels may not extend beyond the ridge of the eave or the roof to which it is mounted. We already have provisions that say that the solar panels can't be sticking up really high off the top of the roof. But technically, although we evaluated it, we didn't see anything in the building code that prohibited them from overhanging the edges of the roof. So it's really an aesthetics consideration, as well as you don't want them overhanging the roof, and then they're gonna, like, the water's gonna sheet flow off of them further. So that's what we're proposing, and happy to discuss that portion or take any questions on the solar panel amendments.
Let's do the solar first. Sounds good. Commissioners, any questions?
I had, for some reason, a really hard time. What is the 60-degree angle? I can't visualize.
Oh, it's super weird. So if you actually take the lot and you draw 60 degrees from that corner.
Oh, so like looking from the bird's eye.
Mm-hmm. And so what one of the variation applications was, the person was actually not putting the solar panels on a roof that faced directly the front lot line. It was a regular pitched roof where, say, it's facing north and south, but the house faces west, right? So the panels were going to go on the north and south side, but they were close to the front of the home. So within that 60 degrees of the front lot line, they wouldn't be allowed up to the edge of the roof, the front edge of the roof.
So so if you just use like that tape, like where would the 60 degrees?
So it's kind of like, sure, yep. So this is the lot,
Yeah.
and this is the front lot line. You draw 60 degrees, like, this is 90, this is 60.
Yeah.
And then wherever the house intersects that, you can't have solar panels in this area. So it forces the solar panels back further on the home, depending on where the home is situated on the lot. hide them, ostensibly.
I can see why you struck that out of the original provision.
Yeah, it was very difficult for staff to try and explain to homeowners. It's not even that easy for staff to calculate, honestly, on applications. And then really what we found when we looked at other communities around us and other communities that participate in the Soul Smart program, which the village does, they really don't limit the street-facing elevations. Riverside was the only nearby community that prohibited solar panels in those visible locations.
Do you think this change will open up a lot of interest? Do you think it'll change things significantly in the village?
I don't, because ComEd recently changed the way that the metering works for solar panels as of January 1. And that's why we had a rush of variation applications at the end of last calendar year, was because it's becoming less financially beneficial for residents to install solar panels under the current program requirements than what were in place in 2024.
So you know it alludes to it in the commentary. Exactly how does the metering change?
So I believe it used to be like a flat amount, and now it's based on when, the time of day that it's generated versus the rates at that time of day.
Okay.
Or maybe I had that backwards. One or the other. It changed in going from a flat rate to rate based on time of day, which the ComEd rates, fluctuate throughout the day.
I guess the gist is ComEd has to give less money to.
Correct. It's less financially beneficial. It takes a longer time to get your return on investment than it used to.
And then just to recap, so the two applications that went before the zoning board, the zoning board denied one and approved the other?
Yeah, they recommended denial of one and approval of the other. The one that they recommended denial of, or did not, it failed to receive a positive recommendation. They didn't recommend denial. That one, the homeowner wanted to just install solar panels on their front elevation, which faced west. And it was like a ranch-style home where it was just a lot of roof facing the front lot line, and they wanted to install them all that way. That was more, I think the zoning board was sensitive to the request, but didn't feel like it met the criteria for a variation. There's the certain standards that have to be met. The other one, it was not the front-facing elevation. It was the roof, where it couldn't be close to that front edge of the roof, even though it wasn't directly facing the front lot line. And the reduction in the solar panels would have meant that they couldn't install solar at all, because it wouldn't have been financially feasible to install it.
But then the village board approved both of them?
They did.
So notwithstanding the not recommending approval, they still. So, and then what tipped the balance for the board then?
I think the board was compelled by the arguments in favor of solar and the recent adoption of our comprehensive plan in November that has a lot more to say about environmental sustainability than what our old comprehensive plan did. And they approved both and directed staff to proceed with amendments to remove restrictions on solar.
So basically, you can have solar anywhere, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's very specific about roof mounted. In the country quite a bit, you have your own panels like just posted in the yard.
Yes, our code doesn't currently allow for that. I've also not seen an individual in my time here that's inquired about that.
Smaller yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Other questions? Okay. Shall we go on to special events? Temporary uses?
Great.
Presentation.
So, over the past year, the Community and Economic Development Commission has been looking at our special event policies and practices. And, special events are kind of what we call it's sort of an umbrella term, right? But really, what we call special events are regulated in various different ways in different components of the Code of Ordinances. So in the zoning code, we have a list of temporary uses, and limitations and provisions about approvals for those temporary uses. In the Code of Ordinances, we further have sections about parades, processions, and other use of the public right-of-way, as well as fireworks, as well as temporary food vendors. So there's a variety of different elements that together comprise a special event. If you think about like St. Cletus Fall Fest, right? It's got a carnival, it's got live music. Those are addressed in the zoning code. But it also has food vendors, which is addressed elsewhere in the Code of Ordinances. So really what the CEDC spent a lot of time doing, we actually hired a consultant to help us review best practices from around the region and pull together an update to the village's special event policy. That was an attachment in your staff report. And to make the zoning code, one, consistent with that policy, and two, consistent with some of our practices that really didn't align with the zoning code, we're presenting amendments to the temporary use provisions. So, attachment 3 is the actual proposed amendments, and I can kind of briefly walk you through them. So, what's changing is that currently garage sales are only allowed in residential districts. We have had churches that have wanted to have like a parishioner yard sale kind of event, and we haven't been able to accommodate that for them. So this would allow in the IB district for garage sales only when accessory to religious organizations or civic, social, fraternal, business types of organizations. So when limited to the personal possessions of the congregants or members of the organization or association. So if a church or some other kind of institutional use wanted their members to be able to have a yard sale, they could do so on their property. And then item 2 used to be indoor and outdoor art, craft, plant shows, exhibits, and sales. We also had that talks about sort of retail sales. We also had a separate section on sale of overstock, seconds, and similar goods, and another section about sidewalk sales. So really what we sought to do here in this item 2 is consolidate all of those retail sales provisions. Generally in the zoning code, all business operations have to occur inside unless it's otherwise specified as allowed through a special use permit. Think about outdoor storage that requires a special use, or through the temporary use provisions like sidewalk cafes, or here we're talking about outdoor retail sales. So generally this is just aligning with what we already do in practice in the village. It's not changing any of our code, any of our practices or requirements. We allow outdoor sales as a temporary use. They do have to be limited to those of a Grange retailer or a licensed temporary food vendor when it's on private property. The no more than 4 per year is language that existed elsewhere in the code that we pulled over here. Temporary outdoor or sales limited to no more than 3 consecutive days. With the exception that temporary outdoor sales accessory to a carnival and temporary outdoor sales of plants and similar landscaping when accessory to a hardware store, retail nursery, etc. So, for example, Horton's does their tent sale, or they have plants outside for sale for a longer period of time. That would not be in violation, but generally retailers would be limited to 3 days. And then on public sidewalks in the C1, C2, and C3 commercial districts, when organized as an area-wide sidewalk sale with participation from numerous retailers on abutting lots throughout the sidewalk sale area. So again, thinking about like the LGBAs, used to be called Girlfriend's Getaway, now it's the Spring Shopping Stroll, or their sidewalk sale that they have.
You know, when you allude to some of these through a number of times a year, going back to the yard sales and stuff, I see you have it just any residents once a year.
Yes, and we could change that. That's just the existing language. We don't require permits for yard sales, so it's possible people are having them more than once a year.
Well, I wondered,
Yeah, that's not
I might want to get rid of that.
We would want to have some limit because otherwise there are individuals who will have one every weekend.
Right. Yeah, so that must be a happy medium. Once
Yeah.
a year, probably not enough, you know.
We could make it twice a year, if like a spring cleanup
I
and
can see a spring
and a fall.
or something.
Sure.
That's what I like it,
Like a lot of crap.
Yeah.
Sales.
They won't let you take it to his house.
That's a good idea. He's gonna sell his own stuff.
Yeah.
Any questions on the retail sales piece? Because that's one where we're consolidating several different areas.
That's item 2, right?
Yes, item 2.
I have a question on 1, to go back to that.
Oh, sure.
quickly, I'm sorry. Does that cover schools?
It would,
It's religious, civic,
yes.
Social, fraternal. I don't know if schools, like I could see PTOs trying to do.
Well, I'm just trying to think, Costa School's been doing one for years.
Well, theirs is all interior.
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh,
What
interior.
is it?
Oh, so it's done inside.
This is, right, this is like a garage or yard sale. Yeah. Civic, social, fraternal, business. I don't think it would, actually. And so we could amend that to include
Yeah, I just don't- I
units
don't
of
know if
government.
it's- Of government, yeah. I don't know if a school would request to do it, but I could see it eventually coming up. at
Sure.
some point, perhaps.
Especially like one of the preschool or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Unit of government.
So we can add units of government, local units of government.
Okay.
That
In Public Works.
include the school district.
Right, so if we say local units of government, it's going to include our schools and the park district, but it won't include other government entities that aren't local to LaGrange.
Although LaGrange can have one too.
I guess the village could, yeah.
I don't know, TVs.
I mean, I do think we sell stuff that the police department picks up along the way occasionally, but again, historically, I don't think it's taken place outdoors.
Got it, yeah. Sorry to digress there.
No, that's fine. So anything on 2, on the outdoor retail sales? Okay, so moving on, farm product sales, that's really like our farmers market vendors. So really, the only change here is we're adding or institutional buildings district. So you can do it on commercial, industrial property, or institutional buildings district. So, again, if they wanted to partner with the church or with the park district, those properties would be eligible as well.
So are we pretty strict about selling only the goods they produce at the farmer's market?
Actually, the LGBA is pretty strict about that.
Really?
Yeah, our farmers are actual farmers that grow their products, and if it's not products that they themselves grow, it's coming from like the farm next door. So there are other farmers markets that are less well managed than the LGBAs that people will buy things at the supply centers in the city that restaurants purchase from, and then sell it as farm product when it's not.
Interesting.
Okay, want to continue?
Christmas tree sales is next. So again, this is one where we're just trying to bring some consistency. It allowed for them in commercial, industrial, and IB district, but not office. So it seemed odd to treat office district differently than all of the other non-residential districts. And then it referenced a health services district, which we don't even have in our code. So again, just trying to clean up some language there. And some of this language that you'll see that we delete in various different sections, talking about prior approval of the village manager, not having to comply with the regular yard requirements, we consolidated all of that at the end because it was listed in some of the provisions and not in others, and so we just put some common provisions at the end about approval of village manager required and not having to comply with the regular setbacks.
So like that, this would cover the YMCA, their tree sale that they do. So because it's not on one of those properties, but they rent it. It says it's on property owned or leased by such.
Yeah, so they, even if it's like a $0 lease agreement, they must have some kind of permission from the property owner for that, because it's the park district's property.
Right.
5 is contractor offices and equipment sheds. We didn't make any changes there. 6 is real estate offices, including model units. Again, no changes. 7 is carnivals, circuses, and amusements. So this is where we add some language to cover small amusements, things like bouncy houses, midway-style carnival games, things that aren't currently addressed in our code but are very common in special events. Just to make it clear that those were also allowed. And we extended the time frame from 2 to 4 days because, frankly, that's what the village has been approving for many, many years for several of our events. And again, getting rid of some of these requirements that will live either in the new special event policy or in the provisions at the end of this section. 8, we already talked, 8 and 9 we talked about, those are being consolidated with item 2. Item 10 is tents. And then with this one, again, we're trying to align the code with current practice, which is that we not only allow tents, we allow other kinds of temporary structures, including stages, fencing, crowd control fencing, cooking facilities, etc. 11 and 12, there's no changes other than to correct a typographical error. Item 13 is the sidewalk cafes, outdoor cafes. So no substantive changes there. And then the next one, which is 13.1, which we'll renumber it when we do the formal ordinance, is outdoor live music currently. And we changed it to outdoor music performance because there may be instances where it's not necessarily a live band, but they're using amplified sound, and it's something that would violate our typical noise ordinances unless it were approved as a temporary use as a special event.
Yeah, that's gonna be my one question. So like in 13, it in compliance with all conditions established by code, etc. Does that sort of just apply generally to all of this? Like if there are other, like traffic?
Right, that's why we struck it, because all of those apply normally
yes,
anyway.
Yes, if you put it in here in one place, it looks like it doesn't.
Exactly, yep. And with some of the things like parking restrictions or noise, those are the things that actually are relaxed through the temporary use special event process because we're approving something that wouldn't be approved all the time. We have a noise ordinance that essentially says you can't have any noise that goes beyond your property line on an average day. But if you're approved for an outdoor concert, you're approved for an outdoor concert for that day, so you're not having to comply with the standard noise requirements. And then the other
things like block parties and stuff, or is that
block parties are separate.
Yeah.
Those are separately regulated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good question though. The other significant change is that we removed the 4-hour time limit because the village in practice has not been enforcing that 4-hour time limit. Think about Shamrock Fest at Palmer Place.
You know, the things that we kept in is like D&E, talking about the 8 dates a year and the hours. That's been in there for a while. No retention from local restaurants, anything?
No, I mean, these are expensive events to put on. So really the 8 dates a year was a problem when this used to apply to indoor live music as well. That was really when we had a lot of concerns. Now that it applies just to outdoor performances, it's been less of an issue. We could always look at amending that. We did have some question at the CEDC. They thought, well, what about once a month? We certainly could do that.
Yeah, you got many months where no one's doing that. So
Right, exactly.
So this like covers, so like Floyd's has their thing next to their that outdoor stuff.
Yeah, Milk Money does their event, yep,
Yeah,
Mhm.
so all these changes would allow for that?
right.
Okay.
Where the practice has not been in alignment with the code is that 4-hour time limit.
Okay.
Because that, they have outdoor live music for longer than 4 hours on the days of that event,
Oh, okay.
as does Palmer's for Shamrock Fest,
Okay.
did the Park District for Endless Summer. I mean, they all went longer than 4 hours. So it's maintaining the prohibition between midnight and 9 a.m.
And these are changes also that are generally recommended by you said there was a consultant? Okay.
Yeah, we hired a consultant who really pulled together special event policies from a lot of our communities that we benchmark against for economic development purposes. So a lot of them are bigger communities than us, but they're ones that we like to look at for economic development strategies. And so we looked at that. We looked at what the village has historically done in practice and the kinds of events we have in our community. And then the CEDC reviewed all of that in putting their policy together. Item 14 is talking about tent and truck sales. This is just really an unnecessary section when we have tents and temporary structures addressed in one spot and temporary retail sales addressed in another. Temporary uses of buildings and planned development, this is a very different kind of temporary use, not at all related to special events. There's no amendments proposed to that. And then we have an other category, because sometimes something comes up that we really didn't anticipate, and those are required to go to the Board of Trustees for approval. And an example, the only example that I can think of in my time here, is when Pillars wanted to open a COVID vaccination clinic on the first floor of one of their buildings in the Central Business District that doesn't allow for medical office. But obviously, in that time, approving a vaccination clinic made a lot of sense. So they came through under this provision to the village board for approval as a temporary use.
And how much time did that take, to get from the request to get into a board meeting? Is that quick?
30 days, maybe? I don't know, everything during COVID is kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But then what the board was able to do in that situation, they were approving it for very specific use. We didn't have to worry about amending the text of the zoning code to now allow medical offices in the downtown, right? But we were able to give them an approval, and then they had to come back. The approval was only for a certain time frame, and then they had to come back and show, yes, we still need it, we'd like it renewed. So it gave the board some discretion in being able to manage that temporary use. Yeah, I think it's good to have an outlet for the things that we may not be able to contemplate and don't fit neatly into one of these buckets in the list of the other 15 things. So then moving out of the list of uses, we get into the bulk yard and space regulations. So this is saying that the village manager can approve temporary structures and equipment, accessory to temporary uses that don't comply with bulk yard and space requirements of this code. So frequently, when you have a temporary use, it's in a required yard, for example. They're going to put the bouncy house in the front yard of the church facility or whatever. This allows the village manager to provide for that. And then it just states that it can't impede the view of operators of motor vehicles and can't be within the site triangle as defined in a different section of the code. Moving on to use limitations, this is where we have some of these general provisions that broadly apply. So it can't have a negative impact, public safety has to be protected, can't have undue detrimental effects on traffic, can't conflict with other previously approved temporary uses. Signs are allowed for, but limited. The village manager has the ability to make an assessment of off-street parking that would be required, and the village manager can deny a temporary use that would unreasonably reduce the amount of off-street parking available in conjunction with permanent uses. And then whatever additional additional conditions the village manager may impose as may be reasonably necessary to achieve the purposes of the zoning code or to protect public health, safety, and welfare. So really not any significant language changes there, just kind of cleaning up a little bit of the grammatical stuff. And then adding an item F to say that a permit is required, because although the code always said that these temporary uses were the only ones that were allowed, and many of them said that the village manager had to approve it. It wasn't super consistent throughout the list. So we're just making it very clear that a permit is required, but that house, apartment, garage, and yard sales in residential districts are exempt from permitting requirements. And the temporary civic uses of any building or property operated by the government agency that owns or controls that property is also exempt unless that temporary use includes fireworks, carnivals, or circuses. That's it.
Questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Wenting?
I really like the coordination, the consolidation, and the clarification. How does the other document relate? Does it become part of the text?
Sure.
Or is it merely referenced in the code?
It's the latter. It's referenced as administrative policy because the policy talks about review timeframes and specific insurance requirements and a variety of different things that are more fluid over time and will require more change over time. So we don't have to go through a whole code amendment to modify the administrative policy.
Okay, because the coordination with the text amendment would pretty much lock it fairly well, but if we change anything or we find the administration of the code to be difficult, this can be amended freely.
Correct. Yep. The other element of the policy is it's referring to the things that are in the zoning code. It's referring to the other things that are in the other chapters of the code of ordinances.
It's a roadmap.
That's exactly right.
Other questions, concerns? Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. At this point, sir, can you tell me the nature of your comment, question,
First
or?
is on your zoning concerning solar panels.
Okay, and before you do that, I'll need to swear you in. Do you swear that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
That's to my knowledge.
Thank you very much.
And what is your name?
Maurice McGee, I live at 18 Sawyer Avenue. And my understanding is the last board meeting, they approved the changes to the zoning code for 2 properties that wanted solar panels. And so when I left that meeting, they said they were going to come to the zoning committee and try to update the ordinances for solar panels because the ordinance is antiquated.
Okay.
And what we have to understand, or I'm sure you guys understand, is that solar is it's not the new thing, but it's the thing that the homeowners are using to lower their energy cost. And the village has a policy where if the front of your house, I'm believing it says it's a 60-degree angle or they can't see the panels or something.
Before you go too far, sir, we started the meeting with that topic.
Okay.
So before you go further, perhaps staff could give a brief description of what we've talked about. I'm probably going to pass notes, so you may like this.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do so. So the proposed amendment would eliminate the current code provision that prohibits solar panels from the front, facing the front lot line or within 60 degrees of the front lot line. It would add some language that prohibits solar panels from overhanging the eaves or the ridge line of the roof. But that would be the only additional limitation that would be in place. Solar panels facing the front lot line would then be allowed if that amendment is approved.
Okay, and that makes wonderful sense. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but what's the next step? Do I go back to my solar installer and say, resubmit the application to the zoning committee? Because they did it once.
Yeah, so what was approved in December were variation applications. So those people were seeking for their specific property relief from the code requirements as they exist. This today is a text amendment. So this is, the Plan Commission is evaluating amendments to the code that would apply broadly to everyone. So the Plan Commission, just like the ZBA, is a recommending body to the village board. So they'll make their recommendation, and then staff will prepare an ordinance for the board's consideration. And then once the board, if they are to approve the ordinance, approves it, then it would become the new set of rules that everyone plays by. So we would anticipate that to be in early March.
So should I advise my solar company to resubmit the application after March or so?
That would be up to you. You certainly could.
No, I mean, they have to approve the application, or they need not a permit. So do I have to tell them to go back to the village and resubmit the paperwork for the permit? Tell them that, or that's what they have to do?
Yes, they would need to submit a permit.
Okay,
Yep. And we're anticipating it would be approved by the village board. If approved, it would be early March.
and I believe it will be, but the permit would come to the zoning office, correct?
Right, it would just be a permit submitted through the portal to the community development department. That's right. Yep.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for coming.
You guys have joined 2024, so.
Maurice, can you spell your last name real quick for?
McGee, M-C-G-E-E.
Okay, I just want
All
to
right,
make sure.
thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions about the text amendments? We obviously did an excellent job. The consultant, they did an excellent job also. It was very well written, very thorough. Any additions, subtractions, besides what we have already discussed? Okay.
I think the only modifications we had were on item 1 was to go to 2 events per year, and an item 1 was 2 events. Item 2 was to add governmental. I don't believe there were any other suggested changes.
Not that I.
Great. That being said, is there a motion to pass this text amendment as written with the adjustments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Can we have a voice roll call vote, please?
Mosher,
Aye.
Wentink,
Aye.
Schwartz,
Aye.
and Pace.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Wonderful.
Great.
Great. That was a very nice job on that text.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you.
I think it really cleans things
Wait,
up.
and that cover both, like the solar panel as well?
Okay, so nothing else on the agenda? Anything we should know about?
So next month, you may have a couple applications to consider. The Park District is preparing some applications potentially for a text amendment as it relates to like flat surface, like hard surface sport courts, which currently require a special use permit in the open space district. And they're considering applying for an application with all their referendum projects coming up, considering an application to make those permitted uses in our code, as well as they have a special use for the band shell at Gordon Park that they may be seeking to amend. Brick and Mortar is working on their revised plans to come back before you with their special use application as well. I don't know if that will be March or if that will be April.
How's the wooden panel doing?
They just got their liquor license approvals last week.
Okay.
They had a hiring fair last weekend, so they're hoping to be open sometime in March.
Oh, good time. This is springtime opening, everyone?
One time around.
They don't,
Yes.
they don't need to submit any test pizzas.
You can go to Lamont. There you go. And will the sheriff be bringing Commissioner Hoffenberg and O'Connor to the next meeting? Maybe
Yeah.
necessary.
Commissioner O'Connor was sick.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Any questions? Good to go?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?